Hello everyone. So continuing with our series of biostatistic lectures. Today is the fourth talk. We've already covered study designs, values of associations for various types of study designs, the gold standard randomized controlled trial, and today I'm going to cover the diagnostic accuracy of laboratory tests, including ROC curve analysis. Corona pandemic has brought diagnostic testing into center stage for not only medical professionals, but even laypersons are also discussing some aspects of COVID related diagnostic tests in their own perspectives. Epidemiologically speaking, population screening and contact tracing are the key frontline strategies currently followed in COVID pandemic. Diagnostic testing is therefore a critical component in the epidemiological surveillance of COVID cases. But there are many challenges in diagnostic stewardship: when to test, whom to test, what to test, how often to test, and what to do with these test results. But from the perspective of our talk today, we are going to focus only on some fundamental characteristics related to the diagnostic accuracy of laboratory tests. The final goal of every diagnostic test is to discriminate the person with disease from those who are healthy. And to meet this goal, it is imperative that a given test has high diagnostic accuracy. So diagnostic accuracy is defined as the discriminative ability of a diagnostic laboratory test or procedure. The basic format for reporting the results of diagnostic laboratory test can be divided into two parts. The test result could be binary, yes or no. That is, the result is simply either positive or negative. Typical examples include a positive or a negative test for COVID, or a peripheral blood smear for malarial parasite, or even a sputum examination for acid-fast bacilli. The second reporting format involves quantitative or continuous lab biomarkers such as blood sugar levels or C-reactive proteins. Okay, now what we would expect from an ideal biochemical marker: that almost all healthy individuals shall have their values somewhere within the reference limits, whereas those who have a disease shall have significantly higher, less frequently lower values of the measured parameter. For example, if CRP is an ideal biomarker and we take 100 healthy newborns and test their quantitative CRP levels, the distribution of CRP values will be just as shown in the histogram in green color, with the mean levels nearly 3 and standard deviation of 0.5 milligram per liter. On the other side, CRP level in 100 hypothetical newborns with blood culture proven sepsis have a mean value which will be higher, 8.7, and a standard deviation again 0.5. The distribution of CRP levels in sepsis babies is shown in a red histogram. Can you see? There is no overlap between the distribution of CRP values between normal and healthy newborns. And if we use a CRP cutoff of more than 5 for diagnosing sepsis in newborns, the test will be 100% sensitive as well as specific, discriminating completely between neonatal sepsis and healthy newborns. In this figure, again we have two sets of neonates, one with sepsis, other normal neonates. Again, we have measured their CRP levels. The red histogram represents the CRP values observed in septic neonates, whereas green histogram represents the CRP values measured in healthy normal neonates. Now, using the same CRP cutoff value of more than 5, we can easily see that majority of these septic neonates have abnormally high CRP above the cutoff, also can be called as true positives, while majority of the healthy neonates have low CRP values below the cutoff, also called true negatives. Still, there are few septic neonates whose CRP values are below the cutoff and hence they will be false negative. On the contrary, there are few normal neonates who had their CRP values above the cutoff, and hence they will be false positive. But even in reality, this dilemma is quite obvious. For example, when Dr. Rohit did his thesis among healthy Anganwadi children aged 6 months to 5 years, although our primary aim was to do vitamin A levels, but we even did CRP levels, we found abnormally high CRP values exceeding the cutoff 5, which were found in nearly 17.2% of healthy asymptomatic children. So before we delve further into the diagnostic accuracy measures, it is important to understand the appropriate study for diagnostic accuracy testing. The most compelling and easy way to design a diagnostic accuracy study is a case control study design. In such studies, sick patients are compared with healthy individuals. There is one downside of this case control design. If you take very sick cases and very healthy controls, then the measures of diagnostic accuracy have been shown to overestimate the accuracy several fold. That's why one should be very careful about the performance of newer diagnostic marker just based on the preclinical testing, and the case control study design is therefore not recommended. On the other hand, a properly designed cross-sectional study where patients are collected as a consecutive series of individuals in whom the target condition is suspected, the biochemical marker under evaluation is performed in all individuals presenting with disease symptoms. This approach of testing in realistic clinical setting with variable spectrum and severity of disease will indeed be optimal. Now I will demonstrate the computation of various diagnostic accuracy measures which we routinely use in clinical setting. The first step in calculating sensitivity and specificity is to make 2 by 2 table with groups of subjects divided according to a gold standard or reference method. For example, urine culture in columns and categories according to the test, that is dipstick for urinary nitrates and leukocytes in rows. Now let us understand basic statistical nuances of the diagnostic test. This is a urine sample of an infant with fever. On left side, we have a newer diagnostic test using dipsticks for urinary nitrates and leukocytes. On the right side, there is a gold standard urinary culture. Now there are 4 possible outcomes according to the previously shown 2 by 2 table. Some will be true positive, some true negative, few will also be false negative, and finally some will be false positive. Now if I ask you what percentage of culture positive UTI had dipstick test positive for nitrites, this will give us sensitivity of the newer test. Similarly, if I ask you what percentage of culture negative infants will also be negative on nitrite dipstick test, this will tell us about the specificity of the newer test. Now let us go the other way around. What percentage of the nitrite test positive samples will yield positive urine culture? This is called positive predictive value. Similarly, what percentage of nitrite test negative samples will yield negative urine culture? This is called negative predictive value. One important point to note here is that positive predictive value and negative predictive value will be influenced by the underlying prevalence of disease also. Suppose underlying prevalence of UTI in infants in a given population is very low, say 0.1%. Then the positive predictive value, that is the percentage of nitrite test positive, will yield positive urine culture will also be low. On the other hand, if underlying prevalence of UTI in a given population is very high, say 50%, then positive predictive value, that is percentage of nitrite test positive samples will yield positive urine cultures will also be high. So in this slide, we will show you the formulae for calculating sensitivity and specificity and how to easily remember them till your exams. For example, sensitivity. You know it is basically a true positive rate, and hence keep true positive in both numerator as well as denominator. And from n of the Sn, that is sensitivity, remember false negative in the denominator as well. So sensitivity defines the proportion of true positive subjects with the disease in a total group of subjects with a disease, that is true positive over true positive and false negative. In other words, sensitivity is defined as the probability of getting a positive test results in subjects with the disease. Similarly, for specificity, it is a true negative rate. Hence, true negative in both numerator as well as denominator. And from the P of specificity, remember false positive to be there in the denominator as well. So specificity defines the proportion of true negative subjects without the disease in a total group of subjects without the disease. That means true negative divided by true negative plus false positive. In other words, specificity is defined as the probability of getting a negative test results in subjects without the disease. Similarly, there are formulae for calculating the positive predictive value and the negative predictive values. But there's a simple trick you can use so that there is less likelihood of a mistake. That rule for PPV and NPV is I am positive when 1 P up and 2 P's down, but negative when 1 N up and 2 N's are down. I hope things may become simpler to remember. So why positive predictive value and negative predictive values are preferred over sensitivity and specificity in clinical practice? Now let me explain this briefly. For example, when we talk of sensitivity and specificity, we often say that 90% of the patients with abnormal pathology will have abnormal or positive test result, while 70% of those with a normal pathology would have a normal, that is negative test result. In fact, this analysis is useful for validation of a diagnostic test, but here sensitivity and specificity measures move in a direction from disease towards the test, thereby limiting their utility for individual patient. But in clinical practice, the test result is all that we know, and both doctor as well as patient is only keen to know how good is the given test resulting in predicting patient's underlying illness. In a clinical setting, the whole point is the diagnostic test is to reach some diagnosis. But sensitivity and specificity actually do not give this information. But using positive predictive value and negative predictive value, we approach from the opposite direction, from test to disease, which gives us clinically actionable information. Moreover, predictive values are also dependent upon underlying prevalence of disease, unlike the sensitivity and specificity. A highly sensitive test is quite liberal in capturing actual disease cases when positive, and hence it's used for screening purposes. But a positive test can therefore easily overshoot into the healthy people, making them false positive cases. On the contrary, highly sensitive test gives you few false negative results, and therefore it is useful in ruling out the disease when negative. In general, high sensitivity tests have low specificity. In other words, they are good for catching actual cases of the disease, but they also come with fairly high rate of false positives. Also, a highly sensitive test means that there are few false negative results. Few actual cases are missed. So, tests with high sensitivity have potential values for screening because they rarely miss subjects with the disease. A highly specific test is quite conservative, and when negative, highly specific test has high fidelity for healthy subjects, even so much that it continues to lag behind as negative, even in few sick people, making them false negative. But a highly specific test gives very few false positive results, hence used as a confirmatory test in ruling in the disease. A highly specific test means that there are few false positive results. Therefore, high specificity tests perform well for diagnosis because of the low false positive errors. On the contrary, tests with low specificity have the disadvantage that among other things, many subjects without the disease will screen positive and potentially receive unnecessary and maybe invasive, risky, or expensive treatment, follow up, diagnostic, or therapeutic procedures. Routinely, we invariably measure sensitivity and specificity of a binary test marker to test its diagnostic accuracy, but there is one robust and very handy statistical method to further test the diagnostic accuracy of a quantitative marker. This is known as the receiver operating characteristic curve, or in short, ROC analysis. The ROC curve provides us with a metric called area under curve, or simply AUC, to capture the overall discriminating power of a diagnostic test. ROC curve analysis is also important to find out the cutoff value of a continuous biomarker which yields best sensitivity and specificity trade-off for diagnosing diseases, which I'll explain in my next slide. For example, let us take the quantitative CRP measurements carried out in neonates with suspected sepsis along with their confirmatory blood culture tests. Out of the 10 neonates with suspected sepsis, 5 neonates were found blood culture positive. Now let us use each CRP value as a cutoff for sepsis. We can get series of sensitivity and specificity values. For example, in this table, if you assume a cutoff of 1, then all subjects with CRP value of 1 or more will be labeled as having sepsis. So such a low cutoff will indeed give you a perfect sensitivity, 100%, but at the cost of specificity, which will be 0%, latter denoting high false positivity rate. On the other hand, if you take the other extreme value of 10 or more as a cutoff, sensitivity will come down to 20%, whereas specificity will be 100%. Now we can plot the sensitivity, that's the true positive rate, and 1 minus specificity, that's the false positive rate, on a simple graph. Now you can plot all these sensitivity and specificity for each CRP cutoff using this simple graph. On y-axis, we plot sensitivity from 0 to 100%, while on x-axis, we plot either 1 minus specificity, or for simplicity, we can directly plot specificity in reverse scale from 100 to 0%. Then we plot the CRP values against their sensitivity and specificity in the above plot. For example, a CRP value of 1 will be somewhere in the right upper corner, having a sensitivity of 100% on y-axis, but a specificity of 0% on x-axis. Next, a CRP value of 2 will have again sensitivity of 100%, but specificity has increased from 0 to 20%. Keep plotting this sensitivity and specificity at each value of CRP. At a maximum CRP cutoff value of 10, sensitivity will be 0%, whereas specificity will be 100%. Now draw a diagonal and then join all the points with a free hand till the ends of the line blend with the diagonal. The curve so obtained is called the receiver operating characteristic curve, and the area it encloses is called the area under ROC curve. If the curve is close to the diagonal, AUC is around 50%, whereas if it reaches to the left upper corner, AUC will be 100%. Larger the AUC value, minimal cutoff of 70% or 0.7, better is the discriminatory power of a diagnostic test. To further emphasize, the interpretation of ROC curve, let us plot the graph with sensitivity or TRP on y-axis and false positive rate on the x-axis. All test values falling in the top upper zone will be sensitive, but not specific, so resulting in many false positives. On the other hand, test values falling closer to the y-axis will be specific, but not sensitive, resulting in fewer positives. But test values generating sensitivity and spin left top corner will give us the best diagnostic cutoff, having the highest sensitivity and specificity. So ROC curve is a graphical plot used to represent the performance of a test over a range of threshold settings. That is, the curve shows the impact of sensitivity and specificity of varying the threshold for which test result is labeled as positive rather than negative. ROC curve plots the test sensitivity as a function of the false positive rate. That's 100 minus specificity. The ROC curve is a single measure independent of the prevalence and hence is referred to as global and unconditional measure. The diagonal line in the figure basically represents a test that is essentially uninformative, as the ability to detect genuine cases is no better than the chance allocation to positive and negative. The upper left hand corner represents a test with sensitivity and specificity of 100%. In other words, a perfect dichotomous test. Clearly, a desirable test is as close as possible to the upper left hand corner and as far from the diagonal as possible. The cutoff point that yields the most upper left point may be appropriate for the clinical practice. Presuming it is feasible and has been validated in preferably multiple independent samples, an area under curve of 1 represents a perfect test, well, area under curve of 0.5 represents an uninformative test. So finally, few downsides of the ROC curve analysis. Two tests, one with high sensitivity, other with high specificity, may have the same AUC. So AUC is not a replacement, but it would supplement other measures of test performance, such as likelihood ratios or predictive values. So it should be noted that ROC curves of different shapes can have same AUC value. So AUC value does not represent a set of unique combinations of sensitivity and specificity. Okay friends, that's all for today. So before I finish, I must acknowledge the help of my husband, Dr. Sahul Bharti, who says he learned statistics from Himalayas. Thank you. Bye-bye.